Welcome to another edition of The Essential, where we'll be rounding up the most important news coverage that is featured on LSTV this year. The cost of living crisis has become an endless haunting presence for many of us living in the UK. So at LSTV, we were keen to hear from the MP for Leeds North West, Alex Sobel, for his take. Yeah, a lot of students are saying that they don't feel like they've heard any sort of support or advice from the government really on how to deal with the cost of living crisis. And for a lot of us, it's especially for first years, first time living away from home, not necessarily educated on how to deal with financial struggles. What specifically do you reckon the government might be able to do to help students in the future?
Well, I mean, I think student finance is a big issue. The Labour Party's policy on student finance is that we should have means tested maintenance grants and we should scrap tuition fees. The Conservative government, there's no way they're going to implement anything like that. But they could look at student maintenance and offer a better package, both in terms of loans, in terms of debt, but they could also look at students who are coming from disadvantaged households, having grants, not just bursaries in particular areas. I think you can also probably do something about regulating landlords, and the universities themselves are a landlord for first years, so the university could also do something on that to try and hold costs down. Because at the end of the day, if you put pressure and your tenants can't afford it, then you're going to have no tenants. And
as we go into 2023, what do you want to see from British politics?
I'd like a general election.
Yeah.
Because I'm really confident that we're going to have a very strong programme and that people will want to see that change, and then we'll get a change of government. And I'm not saying that things will be perfect, because that's not how it works, but what we'll put forward will be a lot more supportive of people than this government have been.
Tad, an economics lecturer at the University of Leeds, explains the economic reasoning behind the struggle many of us are facing with the cost of living crisis.
One word that has coined this situation is polycrisis. First and foremost, we have to appreciate that the pandemic is the single biggest shock to the economy we've experienced in living memory. Then, of course, in March, we had the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. That brings in new cost shocks to the global economy. There's added potentially some impact reported by the Bank of England from reduced labour supply following Brexit, which plays a role on top of all of these other things.
In light of Alex's and Tad's comments, we visited a Just Stop Oil protest in London to see how citizen unrest manifests in a public space.
Right, we've all heard of Just Stop Oil by now. But here at LSTV, we wanted to find out what the protests were like on the ground and talk to some of those involved.
The last time, move, man! Fucking feet out the way, mate.
What's on your mind right now?
I've just got so much respect for these people, it's unbelievable, so much respect.
Any change in society, you always disrupt the lives of people.
Excuse me, have you got any comments on what's happening right now?
I suppose I feel safer now the police are here, because that was a little bit scary just then. I suppose even though we got an overwhelming amount paid.
At this moment in time, okay, you're under arrest for the obstruction of the highway. You don't have to say anything about
This is the first time it's been removed.
The people, citizens of conscience, have got to take such drastic action because we've got a government that do not give a about us, basically.
In January, an 125-page report into anti-Semitism in the National Union of Students found that Jewish students face a hostile culture in student unions across the UK. We sat down with the president of the Union of Jewish Students to find out what he had to say in response.
I was just wondering what your reaction is to the 125-page report into anti-Semitism within the NUS, which branded the union as having a hostile environment for Jewish students.
Look, I think that report was a difficult read for me, for many Jewish students, for lots of activists have given, years of their life to NUS.
So the NUS issued a statement saying they fully accept the report findings and apologise to Jewish students who feel let down by the organisation that should be protecting them. Do you accept the apology?
I think we need to see action. That's the first thing. We need to see a seismic shift in the way NUS treats Jewish students. We need to see cultural change. We need to see a whole range of structural changes.
We just had the report from the Community Service Trust that shows that there was a 22% increase in reports of anti-Semitism affecting Jewish students, staff and student bodies at British universities in the last 2 years. That's 150 incidents. And we also know that a lot go unreported, so it's likely to be much higher. Are you shocked by this figure?
I'm not shocked by the figure, and it very much dovetails again with what Jewish students have been saying.
Could you explain? Many of our viewers don't know what UJS is, what UJS does. So would you be able to explain shortly how UJS help Jewish students on campus and what the role is within student politics?
Sure, so we are the representative body for Jewish students across the UK and Ireland. So in the same way that people have an SU, there is in effect an SU for Jewish students.
At Leeds Student Television, student opinion is always at the heart of our news coverage, and our feature, The Essential Question, allows us to truly get to the bottom of what matters to our students.
October 2022 has seen a peak of economic crisis, with the cost of living reaching new heights. Government U-turns seem to be highly prevalent, whether it be taxes or prime ministers, and for our economically vulnerable students, 3 prime ministers in the last 2 months has not helped.
I mean, we're all kind of expecting it at some point where it's just one of them. The country's a bit of a shambles. I've just kind of stopped paying attention.
I was happy to see her go because she's pretty much ruined the UK. But also I was nervous because there's literally no other good options to replace her.
What did you think of the fact that Rishi Sunak is now our Prime Minister?
It's a bit it feels like an even bigger slap in the face considering all of the tax issues with him and his wife.
He's a bit of a dodgy fella, isn't he?
I think he's really out of touch, and I don't think that can bring anything good to the country.
He is a quite capable leader, and since he has a background in economics and the economic recession is quite nearby, he would do a better job.
Would you have preferred someone else to be the Prime Minister instead?
From the Tory party, I just don't really care. They're all a bit crooked.
I probably would have preferred a general election.
I'm just glad it's not Boris Johnson again.
So far this year, we've been able to speak to so many students and get their opinions on many of the year's biggest headlines, from the cost of living crisis to arguably the most controversial World Cup. The LSTV news team have covered it all.
With the FIFA 2022 World Cup kicking off in just 2 days' time, we wanted to find out if the controversy surrounding Qatar's poor human rights record is affecting students' attitude towards watching it. Will you be watching the World Cup this year?
No.
Why not?
Because boycott Qatar.
There's a lot of problems in there, and I feel bad watching it, and I shouldn't because it's at the end of the day it's the sport that we love, but yeah, maybe not the best place to have the World Cup.
It's a big violation of human rights. And whole FIFA is kind of corrupt. I love football. Football sport is great. But the whole organization around is it's just
Norway had been trying to campaign to boycott the World Cup, and they're not going anyways because they didn't qualify. But I reckon had they qualified, if they then refused to go to the World Cup, that would have given a really huge statement.
Obviously there's not brilliant LGBTQ+ rights in Qatar.
Did you see that Sepp Blatter came out and said it was a mistake to award Qatar the World Cup?
No, I didn't see that. I think that's just him trying to cover it up. Honestly, he's had his hands all over it since the very beginning.
You can separate football and politics, but you can't separate FIFA and politics.